See, a new national poll from 3D Strategic Research, which surveyed 1,000 registered voters in the first week of September, found that 73% of voters believe school choice should be open to all families, and only 20% would vote for an anti-school choice candidate over a pro-school choice candidate for their state legislatures. Brian Jodice joins us this morning. He's the National Press Secretary for American Federation for Children. Brian, good morning. Thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, Richard, great to be with you and your listeners. And a native Mississippian here. Was born in Mississippi long time ago. We got to spend about 4 years. My dad was at Columbus Air Force Base. And so I brought my Bulldog helmet with me. I know you've got your Rebel helmet over your shoulder. So I brought that to liven it up a little bit this morning and have some fun. But, man, really great to be with you.
Certainly appreciate your time. It's a fun time of year with college football rolling along, no doubt. This conversation is one that is absolutely happening in Mississippi surrounding the idea of school choice and educational freedom. But it's not isolated to here in Mississippi. It's happening all over the country. We know that one of President Trump's agenda items has been universal school choice to give parents and families the opportunity to send their kids to school where they think is best. But there also has been a lot of pushback to this idea for a lot of different reasons. So in terms of the American Federation for Children, obviously an organization that is for school choice and moving this ball down the road, where does the perspective come from that this is what makes the most sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you're right. And we've heard it. I mean, I've been listening in to the state and y'all have had really incredible discussions around this. And I think we're, anticipating maybe some more movement on the school choice expansion front. Look, what we've seen from families across the country over the last 10 years, we've seen a lot of momentum, but really over the last 5 is this idea that their kids should be empowered to go to the school that really best meets their needs. And those dollars should be able to follow them. And we've seen this play out in state after state. We have nearly 20 states that have what we call sort of a universal school choice program, but over 30 states have some sort of school choice program. Mississippi has some. They're relatively small by comparison, but we think there can be some growth there. And while that's continued to happen, you saw real momentum out of D.C. this year, where on the 4th of July, the president, through the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, signed into law this first of its kind, federal scholarship tax credit that really can unlock even more school choice in all 50 states. And we could talk a little bit more about what that means and how states can participate, but it really just shows us alignment with what we've seen. And as you mentioned, I mean, poll after poll has shown that the majority of Americans have really shifted on this idea that dollars should follow the kids of the school that best fits them. And that's why we've seen more programs like voucher programs or tax credit or education savings accounts really expand across the country.
Even among our listeners, and if you've been tuning in, you certainly have heard the various opinions. There are some that are just absolutely 100%. Sure. I should have the right as the parent to send my child to the school that they believe or that I believe is best for them. But we've heard from administrators, including superintendent of the Oxford School District, where I live, Bradley Robertson, earlier this week, that said, hey, let's not lose sight of the fact that public schools play a very, very important role, and they are community assets. And school choice should not be a consumer model. This is kind of a greater good thing. Yeah. I think that there are parts of the argument that make a lot of sense on both sides. Is that an unreasonable position?
I just don't think they have to be mutually exclusive of each other. I mean, I think you can even look to somewhat neighboring states. Like we can go to Florida, for example, where they've got the largest school choice programs in the country. And there's often this conversation about, school choice can be detrimental, specifically in our rural communities. But we've seen there where they've had incredible growth in school choice, even in the rural communities. About 83% of their families are still picking their public schools. And they've actually have a link between where school choice programs have been created and actually improving. So I do see this as a rising tide that can lift all boats, because when you interject a little more competition into the marketplace, you're going to give families, options. And this idea that, we've often heard, that you're going to be siphoning money away. Families are going to automatically leave if you create school choice programs. Maybe that provides the public system just a chance to maybe look internal a little bit and think, how can we improve what we're doing here? Because on the surface, I can meet you at the premise and say, so if you give a family a scholarship, you give them a voucher, you give them an ESA, if they're automatically going to leave, well, maybe they're not getting what they need there. And so by providing them that mobility, that equal access to move, we've just seen it work. You've got neighboring states that are expanding school choice. And I think there's more than Mississippi can do there. But look, on the plus side, you guys are doing incredibly well. You've seen test scores increase. One of the few states that have actually seen these NAEP test scores increase. So something in Mississippi is working well. But what we're saying is interject a little more choice into the marketplace, help families find the best fit. We think it can help everybody.
Well, and you brought up where I was going to go next. When you see the progress that Mississippi has made in the last decade, it's funny. It's been coined the Mississippi Miracle, and
Right.
people that have been really involved with it actually push back. They're like, no, this is not a miracle. This is a result of some programs that have been put in place, some decisions that have been made in terms of accountability. It's the result of a lot of hard work, not something that just magically happened one day. But when you look at that and say, okay, what Mississippi as a state has been working, what the state has been doing has worked exceptionally well over the last decade to allow that improvement within schools. Why would you change that? How do you respond to that?
Yeah, so I don't view it as a radical change to that. I think it's just a way to provide families some options outside of that. And look, I mean, you've had good results. You're right. It's been a lot of hard work, policy shifts, right? You're on the ground there. I mean, you've probably seen the positive benefits. But I don't think that by creating additional school choice programs or maybe taking the ESA in Mississippi and expanding out and having more families to be eligible for it, I don't think it has to work counteractive or counterintuitive to what's happening in the improvements. I think it's just about empowering families to be able to find that place that's the right fit for them. And look, we've often talked about this, the big schooling unions will tell you, give us every single dollar, right? Give us all the resources. We'll put it all into public education. We're going to make this the best place. Even with that, even with every single dollar imaginable, it's not going to be the right fit for every kid in the state. And so by looking into, okay, what can we do to invest in students across our state, right? So let's make strong investments in our traditional public schools across the state of Mississippi. Let's make sure that that's student-centered focus. Same thing with these choice programs. I view them as the same way. State legislatures have a great opportunity to say, we're going to make an investment in students. If we go back, if we start shifting to that model, we can kind of maybe bring the walls down a little bit, Richard, on like this versus that, this model versus this one, and let's focus on what's going to be best for the kids.
So many times when we see a problem, we think throwing money at it is the answer. And that's I'm glad that you brought that point up, because in terms of throwing money at the problem, yes, Mississippi has invested, but if you look at per student spending on a state-by-state basis, Mississippi is nowhere close to the top, right? I mean, it's not even close when you compare, what they're spending per student in Virginia or Florida or Arizona, or pick a random state. To me, that makes
you could go into major metropolitan areas in these big states where, I mean, you're talking about even places where they're spending $30,000 a kid, right? And just not getting the results. Now, at the same time, choice programs across the country are often allocating kind of a fraction of that to be able to go with the kid to the school of their choice, and oftentimes doing a lot more with less. So again, I think we're saying the same thing in that, look, throwing money at the problem is not always going to solve everything, but by creating sort of much more of a student-centered kind of investment, looking at education, investing in those students, then let them find the best place. And I think there's great ways to do that with open enrollment, charter school expansion, this ESA model that we've seen, get wildly popular across the country, and it polls really well. I mean, even with Republicans, Democrats, when you ask them about education savings accounts, polls really high, this idea of like, put the dollar in the kid's backpack and let them go where it's going to work for them.
Visiting with Brian Jodice. He is the National Press Secretary for the American Federation for Children. I think you're going to hang with me through the break. And on the other side, I want us to talk about that educational scholarship that was part of the One Big Beautiful Bill. I think that's something that a lot of people don't know about, and I guess can be forgiven because there was a lot in that bill, and we kind of only got headlines out of it when it came out. Before the break, though, let me ask you about this. Surrounding states, Arkansas, Tennessee, Louisiana, those are three of the states in particular that people have talked about as, hey, this is a model for what school choice could look like, and yet the implementation of the school choice and some of the funding for that has maybe not been exactly how it was advertised initially. What are the results that you're seeing in Arkansas, in Louisiana, in Tennessee specifically, because those are neighboring states to Mississippi?
Sure. Yeah. So I don't have the numbers on the amount of kids that are on those programs off the top of my head. I do know that there's new research out, and I think what Arkansas has done a really good job. Their 2 year their program's been alive for 2 years, right? So they're
Sure,
relatively new in this. What I think they've done very well from an implementation standpoint is reporting. They've got new reporting out that shows very quickly in a short amount of time that those kids are doing well on the program. So I think that's important. I think about Tennessee again, new expansion in Tennessee, so they're kind of new to this expansion game. But I've also seen application numbers high. Look, they had some logistics issues early, but they got that all squared away. And I think you're going to see more people asking for it, and I think you're going to see kind of max demand in that state as well. And look, I live in North Carolina. We had a program that was about 30,000 kids a few years ago. It's about 100,000 now. We've seen massive spikes in applications. So look, in the early years of those programs, sometimes it takes a little feeling out, but as long as the intention is there to put the dollars to go with the kids, they end up working out well, and they end up empowering more families. So they've got work to be done, but good results early.
We'll continue the conversation on the other side of the break. It's Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk, Mississippi. Appreciate you being with us on this Wednesday morning, middle of the week, middle of the month, October 15th. Brian Jodice is my guest, National Press Secretary for the American Federation for Children. And Brian, really appreciate you being on as we continue the conversation this morning. You alluded to this, and it's an interesting point to me because I think people on both sides of this issue, at least at the legislative level in Mississippi, have said that the number of students that we're actually talking about that might participate in a movement from one school district or one school to another is actually relatively small, that they don't think it would be a massive number in terms of movement. Have you seen that across the country as being the case, or does it just really vary from state to state?
Yeah, so it varies a little bit, but I mean, you're seeing a bit of a trend. I mean, I'll use where we live in North Carolina, not but 10 years ago, about 85, 88% of our kids were attending traditional public schools. We've had school choice growth here in North Carolina to where now that's about 78%. So you've seen a bit of a shift, but it's rarely a sort of a seismic shift. I mean, I'd make the argument that even if you create some school choice programs that'll help 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 students, at least you're doing something to help those families. And so, look, we'd encourage the legislature to lead on this, be strong on this. I think Speaker White's been very strong on this, a big champion. I know the governor likes this idea of expanding school choice across Mississippi. So, look, if you can help more kids get access to programs like this, we think it's a good idea. While at the same time, again, like we talked about in the first segment, you guys have done a lot to improve traditional public education across the state as well. So again, they don't have to be mutually exclusive of each other. And you can see, some trends, but rarely is it a mass exodus. All right. But it doesn't have to be. It's about just letting families find the place that's going to serve them the best.
We get a message on here on the C Spire text line, 601-879-4395. And the message said, Richard, the answer is follow the money. Now tell me what the question is. And, it feels like that goes with so many decisions that we see at every level of government, follow the money, because everybody's got an interest in that. Money has been a big part of this conversation. And I think one of the concerns that local school districts have had, if the state portion of funding that goes with an individual student follows a student from one school district to another, what about the rest of the funding for that student? Does that fall on the receiving district? Because the state portion of the funding doesn't come close to covering all of the expense related to a new student. What about the pressure that puts on a district that maybe is excelling and has a community that supports its schools in a big way, and yet you put more on those local taxpayers to foot the bill for receiving new students?
Make sure I'm hearing that correctly. So if it's in an open enrollment scenario, I don't know if that question specifically pertains to an open enrollment scenario, right? So if they were to leave one district school go to another district school, right? Those resources should stay the same as far as, I'd be tracking on that. But let's use the example of a kid is enrolled in a traditional public school, and then let's say you created an expanded ESA program that would support them with a scholarship to the tune of $5,000, $6,000, or even $7,000. That probably wouldn't even match 100% of what the state funding would be for that kid in their traditional public school seat. So they'd actually be taking less with them. And I'd also just make the argument that traditional public schools, right, and if they're funded from a state, local, and federal level, which most traditional public schools across the country are, right, by the time you stack that up, those kids are often getting $13,000, $14,000, maybe $15,000 a year on their name. You take a portion of that with them through a choice program, and you're still able to keep those local and federal funds in there. And look, I think it's part of it is a mindset shift and maybe an ideological shift of we need the funds in this school to educate all the kids that are in this school. And while you're going to be able to pull in local support, right, to be able to do that as well, like county taxes or, whatever other supplements you might have, right, that's all going to be able to support them. So again, by sort of freeing up the sort of the state allocation, and even if you went to 100%, right, in a lot of choice programs, they'll do 90% of what we'd consider sort of this cost to educate a kid in a public school that might go with them to their choice program. So rarely is it just yanking it out, right? And it's not like that money just automatically just disappears.
So the one big beautiful bill, and we've got a minute left. Talk to me as quickly as you can about this education scholarship piece that might be coming from the federal level.
Yeah, so here's what happened. The president signed into law. We're calling it the federal scholarship tax credit. Here's what it's going to do in 2027. States that choose to participate, and we're encouraging all 50 states, and obviously we think Governor Reeves would be on board to sign up for this. But states that choose to participate can have these SGO, scholarship granting organizations. Then taxpayers in the state can donate to these SGOs, and they can get a tax credit of up to $1,700 right off their federal tax bill. So it's great for taxpayers, right, to be able to provide educational resources for kids in their state, again, assuming the state chooses to participate, and all states should. And then you're going to be able to create educational resources for families to use for things like private school tuition, but also tutoring, educational services, special needs. There's got some transportation things that can be used. So it really can help kids across a lot of different makes and models, and it helps taxpayers in the state, and it really can be a win-win. And it can help bring school choice to all 50 states in the country. And, there's states that will never do it. I mean, think about your New Yorks and Californias. This could be a real chance at some educational freedom for kids that would never have it before.
Brian Jodice, National Press Secretary with the American Federation for Children. I appreciate your time. Let's visit again.
You got it. Anytime.
Mornings with Richard Cross, 8 o'clock hour on the way.